Now, over 40 ships, boats and submarines and around 3,000 servicemen have participated in Russia's annual naval parade. The display of military takes place as Russia continues, of course, its war against Ukraine. Earlier today, 3 drones believed to have been deployed by Ukraine were downed over Moscow. Now, for more on this, we are joined by our correspondent in Russia, Isabel Nakirya. Thank you so much, Isabel, for joining us this evening. Of course, this display of military power, just exactly what does this symbolize?
Yes, it was a day filled with pomp and color here in St. Petersburg. Hundreds of people turned up to watch the military parade, the Navy parade, and 37 warships came out to sail on the Naval River, which is right behind me. President Putin attended the show and inspected the parade. He also thanked his servicemen and women for a job well done during this time. But the day was overshadowed, of course, by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And, of course, this parade this year certainly shows that Russia is still in control of the northern part of the Black Sea and, of course, has blocked all ships in Odessa. And so it shows that the strength and might of Russia. It's a day celebrated to honor the servicemen, the Navy and the Marine Air Force, the military, the missiles and the artillery, operators. And it's done annually to honor them.
Let's talk about, President Putin's speech during this occasion. What were some of the important things that he put emphasis on?
In his speech today, he said he had added 30 more warships to the fleet, and he said it's part of the policy of the marine. It's part of the marine policy of the country to beef up security and ensure that the country's Navy force is enough. And so he also thanked his Navy force and said he was happy that they are committed and to defend the country in all the frontiers, especially in the seas. And of course, I think he was referring to the Ukraine situation, where Russia is in full force of the Black Sea after pulling out of the grain deal and blocking all ships in Odessa. It also shows that Russia will keep striking back at Ukraine anytime that they are on the offensive.
And just, we know the Africa-Russia summit was taking place as well, where the African leaders were in Russia. Of course, President Vladimir Putin hosted them. A number of issues were discussed, including the Ukraine war. But very importantly, what you just mentioned, the grain agreement that Russia pulled out of. But then very interestingly, in one of his speeches, President Putin did say, however, that he will be providing 50,000 tons of grain to a few African countries. Is that just, maybe, playing a political game, if I may call it that, or a very strategic move from President Putin to saying, hey, we're going to give you grain either way. We don't need, and we will still be pulling out of that deal. So we don't need Ukraine's grain, basically, to be exported to Africa because we can do that for you. Is that maybe a play in a political game that we don't really know of?
Of course, Russia made it clear that it can supply grain to Africa more than what Ukraine was supplying, and Africa does not need grain from Ukraine. It said that it's going to supply an undisrupted supply of grain to Africa, and it's finding new routes to do this. via Qatar buying the grain and using the Turkey route to supply grain to Africa with, of course, as you mentioned, 50,000 tons of grain already coming to African countries, 6 of African countries in the next 6 months. We also know that there are plans to speak to Turkey's President Erdogan. President Putin today put out a statement saying he will be traveling to Turkey, or President Erdogan may come to Russia, and this meeting should take place before Turkey's presidential elections, so that they, finalize plans on what new routes to take to supply grain to Africa. But of course, the UN Secretary General hit back at Russia, saying the handful of grains that it's sending to Africa does not, outdo the damage that has already done in Africa with the food crisis here.
Thank you so much for your time. Of course, it's always great to talking to you, Isabel. Just giving us an update there on the situation. Of course, Russia having its naval parade today, and it just again symbolizes its military power, and maybe also, stating some or showcasing that, this war in Ukraine is not going to end anytime soon with that procurement of even more warships to the Russian Navy. Of course, the President, Vladimir Putin, also saying that them withdrawing from that Ukraine agreement of, exporting grain through the Odessa or the Black Sea, them pulling out of that isn't necessarily, doesn't mean that Africa won't be getting any grain supply. Like we just saw a few days ago, 50,000 tons will be exported to African countries, 6 African countries. So very interesting, and we will be definitely keeping you updated with all of these developments with the Russia-Ukraine war.